Unabomber is a man by the name of Ted Kaczynski, who is notoriously known for targeting people in the past that were better technologically advanced than he was, from different universities. However, what everyone might not know was about his backstory and his childhood struggles. The reason that he stands apart from many domestic terrorists were that he only targeted a specific group of people for specific reasons, instead of targeting mass groups of innocent civilians. He only blew his cover when he planted a bomb on an American Airlines Boeing 727 Flight 444, headed towards Washington, D.C. After that, the FBI started an investigation on the Unabomber because airliner bombing is a federal crime. In 1995, Kaczynski wrote a book called Industrial Society and Its Future. He wanted people to know about his manifesto, but he wanted to keep his name a secret because he would have gotten arrested if he let out his name. The manifesto only was published by the New York Times and the Washington Post as a condition for ceasing his mail bomb campaign. As a result of the being published, Ted's younger brother David recognized the writing style of his brother. David said that the decision to report his brother was very, very painful, but he felt morally complied to do so. David wanted to protect his brother from the violent outcome of any attempt by the FBI to raid his house, such as the Ruby Ridge or the Waco siege, since he feared a violent outcome from any attempt by the FBI to contact his brother. The same week, Theodore Kaczynski pled guilty to murdering 3 people and injuring many more. The Monica Lewinsky scandal erupted in Washington.
On August 21, 1992, a shootout lasting 10 days initiated between the United States government and Randy Weaver. Weaver was a known white supremacist and shared anti-government views.
But unbeknownst to Sarah, U.S. Marshals had been staking out her parents, who were vehemently anti-government, for months. Her father had fled charges of selling 2 illegal shotguns, and her mother had indicated they wouldn't surrender without a fight.
The FBI conducted a siege on a remote cabin in the forests of Idaho, leading to the death of Weaver's wife, son, and dog. Government officials were never tried due to the fear that the results would lead to a greater population of anti-government groups. This case would go on to become an influential force for the Oklahoma City bombing. Starting February 28th and lasting until April 19th, 1993, the United States government became involved with David Koresh and his religiously devoted followers, the Davidians. Koresh was being investigated on claims of illegal arms dealing, statutory rape, and child abuse. David Koresh spread anti-government views and solely prepared his followers for a doomsday in which the government would attack the Waco compound.
911, what's your emergency?
There's 75 men around our building and they're shooting at us in Mount Carmel. Tell them there are children and women in here to call it off.
This case led to the nationwide horror of what the government was capable of, having the officers inflict excessive light upon the house, tearing down sections of the compound, and even pumping tear gas within the apartments housing adults and children. The effects resulted in a severe fire that burned the compound to the ground, taking the lives of 76 Davidians, including David Koresh. This incident, along with the events at Ruby Ridge, were labeled as murders by the far-right extremist and anti-government groups. Timothy McVeigh, the mastermind behind the Oklahoma City bombing, was present at this incident and would go on to plan his attack to take place exactly 2 years later on April 19, 1995.
Next, we take you to the White House where President Clinton made remarks on today's explosion at the Federal Building in Oklahoma City.
The explosion went off around 9 a.m. and we could feel the explosion in the newsroom of Channel 9, at least 5 miles from downtown.
As the chopper goes around the side of the Federal Building, look at that shot, and it's absolutely...
The bombing in Oklahoma City was an attack on innocent children and defenseless citizens. It was an act of cowardice, and it was evil.
9:02 a.m. on April 19, 1995, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, both former U.S. Army soldiers, carried out what would become the deadliest terrorist attack on the United States before the events of 9/11. With both men sharing anti-government views, they detonated a bomb from a truck filled with explosives outside of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, killing 168 people and injuring 842 others. Bombing was conducted directly outside of the employee daycare center, claiming the lives of 19 children. Afterwards, the government took legislative measures in the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, passed in 1996, being signed into law by President Bill Clinton. McVeigh and Nichols were seeking revenge on behalf of Randy Weaver and David Koresh for the incidents involving the U.S. government at Waco and Ruby Ridge. 2 years prior, McVeigh had been present at the burning down of the Davidians' compound, allowing his anger to heighten. The bombing damaged over 300 buildings in a 16-block radius. Timothy McVeigh was arrested 90 minutes after the attack for driving without a license plate. However, before his release, he was identified as a bombing suspect, being sentenced to death by lethal injection and finally passing in 2001. Terry Nichols turned himself in the day of the attack, soon after McVeigh had been recognized.
On July 27th, during the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Richard Jewell, a security guard, found a backpack under a bench, with 50,000 people watching Jack Mack and the heart attack perform. He warned authorities, and they called the police. The backpack had 3 pipe bombs made of nails inside of it. The bomber was Eric Rudolph, who was anti-government, anti-abortion, and anti-socialist. His motive was to punish the government for legalizing abortion. Most people thought it was an act of terrorism and led to more anti-government viewpoints. They were concerned that there might be more than just Eric, a group of them, and that this would continue to happen unless they found a way to stop it. The Olympics continued and security increased dramatically, becoming much more careful about the events. This event caused conflict because it promoted the act of domestic terrorism and increased awareness. In the end, there were 102 casualties, 2 people killed, and 100 injured. Domestic terrorism is still a major topic in society. Whenever an attack like this happens, like the 2017 Times Square bombing, it is heard all around the world, and we come together to prevent these attacks from reoccurring.
Domestic terrorism has always been a large part in American history and still continues. Right-wing terrorists pose a great threat to the safety of our society. Right-wing terrorists often find government rule or action unjust, often because of incidents like Waco and Ruby Ridge, and want to either draw attention to the problem or simply take revenge on those they feel are responsible. They often commit hate crimes and other acts of violence, terrorizing the American people in order to accomplish their social or political agenda. Our government has taken important measures to keep the American people safe and bring terrorists to justice for their crimes. There have been countless atrocities, and after each one, we must learn and come up with new ways to prevent further terrorist attacks. Just 2 months after the Oklahoma City bombing, President Clinton promoted his U.S. policy on counterterrorism to outline how we should handle terrorism in our country and around the world. Other acts have been passed since, such as the Patriot Act, which gives the Justice Department expansive powers to gather intelligence, intercept communications, and create a terrorist exclusion list. This list prevents certain people from entering the country and in some cases deports them. America has changed greatly in response to these horrifying acts. For example, there has since been a big focus on airport security after 9/11, where a plane was hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center in New York. You used to walk through a line of private security companies nonchalantly patting you down and checking your things. After 9/11, those companies were replaced with the government-run TSA. Now, you can no longer walk onto a plane without being extensively checked and patted down. Even with all the policies the United States passed to detect and prevent terrorism, terrorism has since had a big spike. Since the Patriot Act was enacted in 2001, the number of annual domestic terrorist incidents per year has climbed from 3 to 18. It has become a normality to hear about a teenager shooting up a school, a man driving through a crowd of protesters, and abortion clinic set ablaze. Just last year in Parkland, Florida, was the deadliest school shooting since Columbine. Nicholas Cruz shot up his school just 3 months after his mother died. Cruz had very extreme views and often expressed his racist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic and anti-immigrant views among his classmates and on social media. Many students reported him to the police and FBI for Cruz's gun ownership, desire to kill people, erratic behavior, and disturbing social media posts, as well as the potential of him conducting a school shooting. These warnings were ignored until on February 14th, Nicholas Cruz walked into his old school with a backpack filled with swastika drawings and a gun and killed 14 students and 3 teachers. Students and Americans everywhere have found flaws in the NRA's firearm regulations and have held many protests and rallies to gain support. They have been able to pass many bills in Florida and all over the country promoting the safety of all Americans. Our government has done a lot to prevent terrorism, but there are so many flaws, and we are far from an end to such horrendous events. Yet, we must never stop learning from the past to create a safer, carefree future.